Hi everybody. So I've been having a few inquiries this week around financial planning, and I just wanted to share something with you just to kind of give you a bit of a behind the scenes look into exactly what a financial plan is, what does it do, and what are the benefits of going through this kind of journey. Now, with financial planning, the main benefit of going through this particular kind of journey is to really get focused and clear on what your financial goals are for the next couple of years and beyond. Now, for me, financial planning, the magic of financial planning is giving you the opportunities and choices to be able to kind of road test and map out, well, what would happen if we did this? And then what would happen if this happened? And then what would happen if we wanted to do something completely different? So, when you have these conversations and you think about, well, what would happen if we moved house or paid the mortgage off early or saved an extra £100 into our pension pot or retired at the age of 60 rather than 65? Financially, could we afford to do that? This is where the power of financial planning really becomes quite exciting. So I just wanted to share a demonstration case that I've set up this morning to kind of show you a little bit about behind the scenes of the work that I do as a financial planner. So I've created a test case in here for myself and my husband. I've made these figures up so they're not reflective of our situation, but just to give you an example. Now, when you become a financial planning client, you fill in a really simple questionnaire that gives me some information about your current financial situation. Often I do this together with clients because it can become quite overwhelming. Often it can involve writing off to pension providers, for example, to gather information about your schemes so that when we start to build out one of the columns on the left here, we know exactly what that currently looks like. So let's start in that area here. So I've just put some examples in here of we've got £500 in our current account, we've got £5,000 in a stocks and shares ISA, and we've each got a pension pot which we built up over the years, one that's worth 100,000 and one that's worth 50. So just using some examples in here. Now, I won't go into the nitty gritty of some of these sections in here, but when we talk about investments, obviously we need to be very mindful about how is that money invested and what level of risk are you currently taking. So we can gather that information from looking at some of your existing pension schemes, for example. And we can actually build in here, what are they currently growing by? What do we think inflation might do over the next few years and longer term? So we can get a really accurate, or as accurate as possible, in terms of what we think those funds may deliver for you financially in the future. Then we go into income and expenses. So then we need to put in details about what your current earnings are and your current expenses. So in this example, I've put in here that Gareth has £4,000 a month in salary. I take £1,000 a month from my business. And we're going to make the assumption that because we want to retire at the age of 60, that at the age of 60, that income will stop. Now, in some circumstances, it's not quite that straightforward because we might want to go part-time. It may well be that from the age of 60 to 65, perhaps that income will halve because we'll go part-time. There's lots of different scenarios around that, but just to kind of keep this quite straightforward. We'll then factor in state pension. So at the moment, I know from doing a state pension forecast, and this is an exercise that we would do for you, that when Gareth reaches the age of 68, he'll receive full state pension of £164 a week, which is the current full state pension. And then when Gareth reaches the age of 70, because I'm younger than he is, then my state pension would then kick in. So that kicks in for me at 68, but Gareth will be 70 of the same amount. So we've got those in there as income. Then we go into expenses. Now, ordinarily with expenses, we'd have one line per expense. So you'd have one line for food, petrol, electricity, gas, all the things that you're paying for every month. Mortgages, for example, and you'll have an end date on some of those. So our mortgage, I've assumed in this example, will stop at the age of 60, but our ongoing monthly cost bills, living expenses will continue until we're not here. So the end date of those expenses is obviously much later in life. Now, for simplicity, I've just bulked all the expenses together onto one line, and I've assumed that £3,000 a month is all we'll need for the rest of our life in terms of paying our bills and expenses. Now, in reality, that isn't going to be the case, because there's going to be things that we want to do when we hit the age of 60 and between now and then that we need to factor into this plan. So that could be, for example, buying a property, a second property. It could be putting the kids through private school in a few years' time. It could be replacing our cars. It could be repair work that's needed on the property. It might be going on a luxury cruise every year in our retirement. It could be buying a holiday home by the coast. So these are the kind of conversations that we have together. And we then sort of build out different plans at the top here around those scenarios. But on our current situation, this is our current expenses and our current mortgage. Then what we can do is have a look here. So what this tells me visually is that currently our income is made up of two coloured bars: my salary and dividends and Gareth's salary. And this black line here is our current expenses. So I can really easily see straight away that our expenses are being met by our income, and we've got more at the top that we could then save. Now, you'll see the expenses line suddenly starts to drop off here. So this is when our mortgage is paid off at the age of 60, and then our expenses reduce down. Now, also our income, in this example we've built, will stop at the age of 60. And further along the line, we've got our state pensions that kick in here and here. So what we've got in the middle here, between when we want to retire at 60 and when our state pensions kick in, is deficit. So that means that we're going to have to find money from somewhere to carry on paying our expenses and maintain our standard of living, and that's got to come from somewhere, right? So at the moment, that deficit is going to be funded from our savings and our pensions and our £5,000 ISA that's going to be invested. It's going to grow over the next 20, 30 years. And then every year we would need to find £36,000 to meet our expenses, and that would have to come from our savings and pensions pots. Until the age of 84 and 82 for both of us. Then that money has gone. It no longer is there. We've used it all up. So we then have this blank area here. Now, if I show you that in a slightly different format, you can see here, we then start going into some financial problems. Now, that is fine if we only live until we're 84 and 82, but beyond that, we need to fix this so that we can still retire at 60, but make sure that we still have enough money for the rest of our lives. And that's where it starts to get exciting. We then start to think about, well, how can we bridge this deficit? Because we want to see the end balance at the end of our life as a positive and not a negative. Okay, so what I've done is I've just built a very quick scenario in here to show, well, what would happen if we retired at 65 rather than 60? Now you can see straight away here that that deficit has disappeared. So it could be that Gareth and I sit down and say, well, do you know what? If we don't change anything else, we could just retire 5 years later. But actually, we don't want to retire at 65, we want to retire at 60. So we need to be thinking and working together with the financial coach around how can we make this happen? And then it gets really interesting. We might think about, well, do we need to change our investment strategy? Do we need to be investing differently? Do we need to be investing more? Do we need to be thinking about changing our lifestyle, which ideally not. Who wants to reduce their lifestyle? And certainly who wants to reduce their lifestyle in retirement? You know, we've all accustomed to having a certain lifestyle in life, and we want to continue that in retirement. So then that's where it really gets quite interesting. It could be, for example, we have a look at, well, you know, if you're currently paying expensive fees on your pension and it's not invested in the right way, that just by changing that, that could bridge that gap. It could be that by putting an extra £50 a month into your pension every month, that will bridge that gap. But we can't make those decisions until we know what we're dealing with. And that's the power of financial planning. I've built out another scenario in here as well, that let's say Gareth and I want to go and buy a second property. In 2 years' time, we want to go and buy a second property. We're going to put down a deposit of £10,000. So I've put in here a one-off expense that we're going to need to find £10,000 when Gareth is 41, and we'll then fund the rest with a mortgage, and that mortgage will cost us £500 a month. So I've put in there we'd have a new expense in 2 years' time, so it will be a 20-year mortgage, and we need to find the deposit. So I've built those into the plan. We can go back to our model here, and we can see that that expense, that £10,000 that is required in 2 years' time, will be met by deficit because it's covered by our savings, and we'd be able to maintain our expenses. But again, if we were going to retire at 60, we would still be able to retire at 60 and use our savings up until about 72. So that deficit that we did have in our 80s has now been brought forward into our 70s. So yes, we could still buy that property, but we would then potentially have a much earlier problem than we do right now. Now, obviously, there's lots of questions that will come off the back of that. Well, we could just sell that second property. We'd have a boost of money coming into our savings pot, and that could be used to fund our retirement for the next X number of years. Or it could be that we'll get rental income from that property, and that would help to bridge some of this income shortfall. So we can build some of those projections into here as well. There's lots of different kind of scenarios. But I hope that just kind of gives you a flavour of some of the power of financial planning is all about conversation and scenarios and thinking about, well, the what ifs. What if we did this? What if we did that? And this does not involve at this stage, doesn't involve any financial products. This isn't about investing in an ISA versus a pension. This is, at this stage, it's about building out, what does your plan look like? What do you want to be doing in retirement? What do you want to be doing in 5 years' time? Can you afford to be making those decisions? Can you afford not to be making those decisions? And that's really where the power of financial planning comes in. So if you've watched this video and you're intrigued or interested to understand more about how this could work for you in your situation and what it would look like to work together, then just pop a comment below. You can get in touch with me. You can book a free discovery call and we can talk through how this works and whether this would be beneficial for you in your situation. So I hope you've enjoyed the video and speak to you again soon.